Right to be Read podcast, episode number 137, interview with Alex Newton.
You are listening to the Right to be Read podcast, and this is your host, Ani Alexander.
Hello there, and welcome to the Right to be Read podcast. It's me, Ani Alexander, and I hope that you did win the NaNoWriMo and you ended up with a novel. I hope that your NaNoWriMo experience was good, that you ended up at least with a habit of writing every day, and that you were not disappointed with what you've got as a result, and you will end up with a really polished, nice, and published book at the end. As for today we have yet another interview, and I will be talking to Alex Newton, who is the CEO and founder of Klytics.com, which is the leading Kindle marketing research service on the net. Alex brings more than 20 years of experience in publishing, data analytics, and management consulting to the table. Today we talk about his company Klytics, about publishing trends, and how he made the transition from traditional career to online entrepreneurship. And what's even more important, we discuss how one can predict if the book will sell or not before even starting writing that book. Well, I hope you'll enjoy it and find it valuable, and let's dive into the interview now. Hello, Alex. Welcome to the Right to be Read podcast. I'm happy to have you here.
Hi, Annie. It's a great honor to be here, and hello to all the listeners. Hi.
Okay, so we'll start with you explaining our listeners what do you have in common with writing, books, and self-publishing. What do you do there?
All right. My background basically is I'm the founder of the website Klytics.com. That's K-Lytics.com. And we basically provide market research services for Kindle authors, for authors in general, and small publishing companies. Basically with a very simple mission to allow you to make faster and better publishing decisions that at least increase the odds of success of whatever you do out there in the market as an author or publisher.
Okay, I see. So basically, it's like you're covering the hard part, like what needs to be done after writing and finishing the book, right?
Well, it's more actually the front end because, yes, the research does help you a lot in terms of where to position your book, like in what categories, etc., after it's finished. But the whole purpose of what I'm doing is actually more upstream, even before you start writing a book. Because the situation is, and we talked briefly before, Annie, there's currently about 3.2 million English-speaking titles on Kindle. And many people, young people with a vision, hey, I can do an online income with Kindle, come into this market not aware of the competitive situation. So in essence, the data we're offering is helping people to identify those Kindle markets where you have still a considerable level of sales, but at the same time, it constitutes market niches that are not overly crowded yet. So that's the one purpose. And the other purpose is very frankly, also to tell people what not to write.
Yeah, I see.
And that's very important. So just to give you an example, I had an elderly couple, who came to us and say, hey, we are retired now. We want to generate a little additional income. And they go, and we have this great passion for gardening, and we know everything about gardening. I said, okay, very good. Let me have a look in the database. And, within 1 second, I could tell them, okay, there is about more than 20 subcategories on the topic of gardening, but even if you make it into the top 20 in the category, you will never sell more than 2 to 3 copies a day at probably $2.99. So it's also about what not to do and not to fall into the trap of believing there is a market when there in fact is no market at all.
Okay, I see. So basically, since I'm kind of smelling business in here, like the business approach to writing, that's, how I call it usually. Let's get back to your story, because I know that this is not something you've been doing since a long time. It's like, you had a longer story of doing something else. And you were in corporate, which you were happy enough to leave. So tell us that story. Why did you want to leave, and how did you manage to do so?
Right. So ironically, I did start in publishing about 20 years ago when I worked for a publishing company for a while. But my main career has been in one of the top 3 top management consulting companies in the world. Where I worked for about 20 years. So my whole, life and passion was about solving complex problems, for companies, usually based on analytics and data. And for me, that has been a very great career, both career-wise, also income-wise. But as you know, sometimes I think it does not matter whether you work in whatever top management or are even the boss of a 500,000 employee company, or whether you work in McDonald's. Now, this may sound arrogant at first, but the point I'd like to make is, yes, both people have a great divergence in income, but probably their stress level and the lack of time they spend with their family is the same. And it's sometimes funny to see how equally people who work at a conveyor belt in a factory, or work at McDonald's, or work as a waiter or waitress, are equally as unhappy as the people who have all the money but who work 90 hours for an investment bank, right? Mm-hmm. So my personal story was, well, not necessarily one of great unhappiness, quite the contrary. But I'm father of a little daughter, and I just noticed that I spend the majority of time traveling and living out of the suitcase and not seeing my family enough. And my story into the online business literally began about not too long ago, about 2 years ago. I knew what a website was. I had no clue what's the difference between whatever a hosting provider and a domain registrar, and what is WordPress, and what is this, and what is a membership site. I had literally no clue. So, but 2 years ago, so here I am in a really, excuse my words, shitty hotel, somewhere in an industrial city, and preparing myself for a client meeting. And I wake up in this hotel and think to myself, what the heck am I doing here? And that's where I determined I have to decouple my personal presence and work hours from the income stream. And that's when my dream started of getting into the online business, because I felt there you have endless opportunity, yeah, and probably also a lot of competition, but there's a lot of opportunity, and it gives you, at least in theory, exactly that opportunity of making your dream come true, of generating an income stream which is not directly related to you standing, being in a meeting room in a company, or standing behind the counter at McDonald's.
Okay, I see what you mean. So most of our listeners would eventually like to quit where they are for the same reasons, most probably, and they would like to become authors instead. So I guess, it's not exactly the same, but maybe if you share, how did you do that? Where did you start? What did you do exactly? What were the things that helped you actually make this transition?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing was to find out what I wanted to do. And that alone, to many, is a huge burden. And many people never come past that point. And I actually started with probably the same dream as many of your listeners have. I thought to myself, I wanted to write books, right? And so I went for one of these courses, how to write a Kindle book and how to upload your Kindle book and how to get rich with Kindle type of thing. And at the time, it was about 2 years ago, was one of these courses that taught you how to do a cheap ghost-written outsourced book and whatever, do a paleo breakfast recipe book and upload it, and you'll be rich. Yeah? I'm exaggerating a bit
Yeah.
now, right? But actually, it was a very good course and a very good person doing it. However, being a fact-based person, I went onto the Kindle platform and really started to dive into the Amazon website, right? And I'm very good with computers, so I found a way of really digging deep into what does sales rank mean actually in terms of sales? How does sales rank behave over a 30-day period, over a 90-day period? So my first conclusion was, if you see a paleo breakfast recipe book ranked number one on one day, it doesn't mean anything, because the sales ranks fluctuate by, I analyze now about 1.5 million books, and the sales rank fluctuate by as much as up to 25% in a 24-hour period, and about 90% over 30 days. So to cut a long story short, I started with probably the very same dream and actually wanted to pursue the dream, but I got sidetracked into, hey, with my analytical power, the thing that I've been doing for the last 20 years, I could bring value to this new market over and above me becoming an author. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to become an author, but I suddenly saw how my current passion and knowledge, could relate to this industry. So the first thing I want to convey is, you may not end up necessarily in exactly the space you dreamt you would end up when you started, right? So maybe you started as a Kindle author and saying, hey, I want to be an author in whatever nonfiction books, and you end up being the most successful romance writer there probably is, or vice versa. Or so the first thing is, let's be a bit flexible on the way, but let's not lose out of sight where you want to be. And so basically what my advice would be to the listeners is, okay, if you say you want to be an author, really ask yourself why you want to be an author. Do you want to be the author because you have something to say to the world? You have a certain passion about something you want to share? You want to be an author just to pay the rent? You want to be an author because you want to be a publishing entrepreneur? These are very different objectives. And I think it's very important that you know the objective when you start.
Agree. So I just, can't help myself but asking, why did you want to become an author?
See, my story ended up like it probably ended up was, I wanted to be an author because I wanted to spend more time with my wife, my 5-year-old daughter. And I wanted to be able to work from anywhere at any time for the time I wanted. That's perhaps the simplicity of it.
Okay, because I see. I'm just wondering because, everything you told is kind of, more people want to become entrepreneurs and specifically online entrepreneurs for those same reasons. So it kind of, which you eventually became at the end. So that's why I asked.
Exactly. And so to me, it is, I think now working with many authors, and by the way, my dream of, I am authoring whatever, my kid's book and this and that, but it has not ended up like being my prime mission, because the objective was basically not, hey, I have this great passion and I want to share it, via the book channel. But it ended up like I have this great passion and dream, and I just found almost by coincidence that this K-Lytics service offering is the best way I can convey my passion and let other people participate in that passion and get some value from it. And I think as an author, I would now, I think if I now were to write a book, and by the way, I may be writing a book about all this in K-Lytics, is really having something to share and creating value for other people by sharing it.
Okay. Yeah. I see. I see now. So let's create value now. Let's just talk about, you mentioned that what you are offering in terms of data and in terms of information that the authors are needing. Authors can use both before they start writing their books or, at some point even after in terms of marketing those books. So what is the best? Like, let's say I just, I haven't written anything yet. I just only have decided whether I want to cover fiction or nonfiction. That's the only decision I've made. And now I have to start from scratch. So I need some kind of information to base my decisions on. And what do I do next? What is it that I have to look at?
Right. So if you're saying, well, let's take fiction for an example, because you mentioned it. Say you have made up your mind roughly. The first thing to look at is if you want to write fiction, you want to write for a certain market, obviously, or for a certain readership. Now, the first thing, before I get to the data bit, is again a little bit of philosophy on the side. I believe personally the most successful authors are those authors who do have a certain passion for something, and they can make this passion coincide with the realities of the market, so where demand is, right?
Yeah.
So even if you say there's two type of authors now going into fiction. The ones would be simply, well, tell me what are the best fiction markets to go into, and we'll talk about this in a second. Or there's others who at least have to narrow down their prime genre. So, for example, they say, look, the only passion I really have and will ever have is science fiction literature. So I want to do science fiction. And to those authors, my answer would be, well, that's great. But do you know that if you go into science fiction on Kindle or any bookstore for that matter, there's about 70 subgenres, market niches defined within the very genre of science fiction. So is it whatever? Is it science fiction dystopian? Is it alien encounter? Is it post-apocalypse novels? So you see there's lots of nuances. And all these markets have a very different performance on Amazon Kindle in terms of the level of sales and the level of competition. So give you a concrete example. If you want to go into, before we even dive to the niche level, the first thing to realize is if you go on Kindle, there is currently about 30 main genres, ranging from romance, science fiction, biographies, memoirs, children's books, you name it, down into, more technical, non-fiction book genres. And the first thing people have to know, the genres that dominate Amazon Kindle, and when I say dominate, I really mean dominate, is romance, mystery, thriller, suspense, science fiction and fantasy, and then still a little bit of teen and young adult, and then it's rapidly tailing off. So, that is the first thing to know. Then, and by the way, that does not mean that you have to do romance, mystery, thriller, suspense, science fiction, or teen and young adult. There's also other markets to be had, but you really must be aware that the typical Kindle owner, the reader on Kindle who's buying books, is mostly buying in those genres.
Okay, I see. So, what do you think in that case? I mean, it's quite a time-consuming thing, right? It's not like something you can do in 10 minutes and figure all these things out. So, writers have this challenge of balancing their time between writing and marketing their book and actually engaging and interacting with their readers at the same time. So, so how can they get what they need to get and find out things, but at the same time kind of, save a little bit of time on the whole research, because not everyone enjoys doing that, first of all, and then not everyone has the time for it as well.
And frankly, I also believe people should be doing it, because even if you conceive yourself as an author company, as an entrepreneur, it is about a publishing business. Now, within a big publishing business, you have certain roles, and there will be a marketing and a market research department. Now, as a single entrepreneur, you have to wear all these hats. So in order not to suffer from a heart attack very early on in your career, I think you have to ask yourself, what is really at the core of what I should be doing and have to be doing? And what are the things that are much more efficiently outsourced? And I think, especially given the current situation on Kindle, research is something that to a large degree you can and should be outsourcing, because in all essence and honesty, you should be spending your time writing. And then, okay, there is the marketing book and there is a lot to that as well. But the core of a writer is writing.
Yeah.
Right? So for example, talking about saving you time, if you went onto Kindle yourself and you try to research the type of data, for example, I have in the database, you will never be able to do it. Not even if you spend 90 hours a week, all week for 3 years, because there's a lot of, computer intelligence going into the whole thing. Uh-huh. So for example, if you go and say, hey, I want to write romance. Let's do a very concrete example so that we add value a bit here to your listeners. So if you go to the romance category in the Amazon Kindle market, and I'm doing this here almost real time next to it. If you go for romance, then within romance alone, you have about, probably 79 submarkets related to it. But if you really dive into it, and the romance ranges from, mainstream romance to very specific niches. Uh-huh. Now, if you were to look on the Amazon Kindle market, which currently has about 2,800 book sub categories, and you only filtered out the romance categories, which is exactly what I can do with the K-Analytics database, then romance alone, let's make this very concrete. In romance, you currently have, I'm doing this here real time in the tool. In romance, you currently have, in terms of number of subcategories, there are currently 65 romance-related categories in the main category romance, okay? Of these 65, there is only a handful that really have an attractive level of sales, but at the same time, still a low degree of competition. So of these 65, and romance, by the way, is one of the best genres in this respect, you have only about 50% of those genres which are in some way good or attractive. And what the tool basically allows you to do, you can sort now all these subcategories by the level of sales, the level of competition, what is the average price in those categories. And to give you one example, if you were to go into romance right now and you wanted to really go for those markets where you have at maximum, say, 5,000 titles as competition, and not 80,000, but 5,000 as competition, which is still a lot, right? But it's not as crowded as others, but where you have an extremely high level of demand, it would be primarily related to romance paranormal type of novels. So, the romance that entails the ghosts, the witches, the demons and devils.
Yeah.
And if you really look at those niches, it's amazing. If you make it, for example, into the top 20 of a category, romance, paranormal, demons and devils, as an example, if you make it in the top 20, you would, on average, and that is what the data can tell you, the research here, on average, the books would make about 200 sold copies a day in the top 20. whilst the level of competition is only around 4,172 titles in that very category. So you get the idea. It is essentially about, if you either start on a very clean sheet of paper and had no clue what to do, the data can give you literally within seconds, out of 2,800 book markets on Kindle, these are the top 50 from a sales to competition point of view.
Okay, so let's just, get out like the main message that is important here is that if you want to actually sell books and make money with those, you have to find the right balance between finding the category that is, I guess, less competitive, but at the same time sells well, right?
That's exactly the essence of it. And there are still pockets out there, pockets of markets, pockets of opportunity on Kindle that offer you exactly that equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. So basically, if there is a writer who is not really picky about the modifications he has to make within the same genre to the book idea, he can actually go ahead, decide and come up with the right subgenre and then tweak his main idea to respond to that niche demand and write a book that is expected and waited for in that niche, right?
Exactly. And we have, interestingly, by the way, we have a couple of members in the K-Analytics membership who are very successful authors who started using the data exactly like you say, Annie, but also in addition, almost in a certain creative way. So they go into the data and say, okay, what are the top 5 markets in romance?
Uh-huh.
And then they go into science fiction and say, okay, what are the top 5 markets in science fiction or
so
markets?
they combine those two, right?
And then they start blending the themes. So, for example, in romance, right, you have here a number 6 genre in terms of market attractiveness, which would be romance, historical romance, Scottish, so the famous Highlander type of romance. Then you go to, say, the genre erotica, and you get all this alpha male tough type of blah, blah. And then you could go into science fiction, and it will tell you, certain things about alien something. So they started blending, the alien alpha male that, lands in Scotland and and falls in love with this Scottish princess. The opportunities are limitless. But you have to know where to start, what readers read and buy.
Okay, so since you're you have all this data available, what can you tell me about series versus standalone books?
Well, that's an interesting phenomenon because when you using the data that I have and I look usually at the top 20 or top 100 titles in any genre or specifically sub-genre or niches, as we call them, or sub-markets. What is very interesting that in some, especially the high-selling genres such as romance, series are really dominating the game. Mm-hmm. I was completely surprised by it. We also did a special on it once. It is interesting how series build a brand, and that brand then really starts pervading the respective genre. So there's a lot to it, and I think it's the trend has also been in the old Kindle unlimited royalty scheme. Before you were paid, but many people were basically trying to make short books and put them into a series. So it's also a bit difficult to say what is cause and effect, right? So is it really the series that per se is the successful bit, or did it just happen to be that many Kindle authors a year ago cut their book into 3 parts and published it as a series because they thought they make more money of it? So I'd be a little careful in terms of saying what is cause and effect, and is series really the holy grail? But all I can say from the data is in almost any high-selling, attractive niche, I would say about a third of the bestseller list is dominated by some series of sorts.
And do you know approximately how many books in a series you should have minimum for the series to pick up?
I would have to dig deep in the numbers, but gut feel from what I see from the data, it is usually at least, three. It's between 3 and 5 books where people start calling it a series, and where it's also getting started. I would say 3 books is what it is. It's a trilogy. Once you start talking about 5 books and more, it's really a series. And once you get into the 10 to 15, 20 books, then it's really a series as a meaning as a brand, And
okay.
obviously the most famous, obviously the Perry Rhodan science fiction novels, probably being the most famous one, where you have, God knows by now, hundreds and hundreds of books in the series. Also written, and by the way, that's the charming thing, written by different authors, right? I mean, Perry Rhodan books are written by many different authors, and the brand has become so strong that you can start employing guest authors to write the books under the brand.
Okay, I see. So, I mean, obviously, I always kind of, mention and put accent on the fact that there is no magic button, there is no one universal strategy that works and stuff like that. But just going back to what you have told, wrapping this up, I would simplify by putting this in a way that, let's say, if you make the research in advance after knowing approximately what you want to write, if you choose the category, and if you write a good book in that category that you have been chosen, and if you manage to make it a series, then it should most probably work.
It should most probably work, given that you have the additional marketing power behind it. We may want to talk about this or in a different podcast, but I think what I want also to say is I really want to motivate other authors. There is opportunities out there, but I also want to be very honest and realistic to people. People tell you, hey, you can get rich with Kindle publishing, just outsource a book, upload it, and you'll be rich. Then it's a complete lie. It does not work. It never has worked. And the only people really making money with it were those who published these type of courses. That's my message number one.
And made money from the courses.
and made money from the courses, but never from the book.
Yeah.
And no offense taken, even one of the authorities on Kindle publishing, if you go onto their books, and look at how many books that they sell, well, you look at the sales rate. 30,000, 50,000. I mean, that's not enough to pay the rent. So first note is, if somebody tries to talk you into, you will be able to quit your job by just putting up a couple of cookbooks on Kindle, forget it. It will never work. Go ahead, Annie.
Yeah.
You were to interrupt.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was just, going to tell that, most probably if the only reason you want to do this is money, then that's the wrong reason. Because obviously, you won't get big amounts of money straight away. And if you don't enjoy writing books, and if you don't want to become a writer just by the fact that you will be writing a lot, then most probably you'll be fed up and give up too soon.
That is correct. I mean, having said this though, there are authorpreneurs who do publish outsourced books, who are very successfully working with outsourced books, but they go about it in an extremely professional way. They run it like a publishing company, relying on the right research, targeting the right markets, having good quality ghostwriters, so that does work.
Yeah, but then, I have trouble calling them writers, to be honest, because for me, they are publishers, they are businessmen, but they're not writers.
And I couldn't agree more. So, yes, as an author, I fully agree with you. You have to have a certain passion for writing, and ideally for the thing you're writing about. And that is the foundation. And my mission is, to help people to marry that foundation with the realities of the market. And I also fully agree with you. There is no silver bullet, not even a golden bullet or a diamond bullet. There is no magic pill. But what you can do is using data and things that, many authors, in all honesty, are also not so good at. Some are very creative and good at writing, but not so good with numbers.
Oh, yeah.
But if you get the two things together, you can at least increase the odds of success. That's one big mission. And the other is help people not to waste their time and creativity on things where you can almost from the outset say it's never going to work. Now, I don't want to come across as negative at all. There's real opportunity out there. But you really have to know what you go for before you start your book project, because otherwise you will have all this, 1 year of writing wasted because you could have told from the very beginning, yeah, it may be a market, but unfortunately, even if you make it into the top 5, you will only sell 3 books a day.
Yeah, and let's make a note here. There are many writers who don't really do this for money. So they don't really care how many books they will sell. They just dream of completing a book, writing a book, and then seeing their name on a book cover. So if that's your goal, then, you don't have to worry about that. Or, everything we're talking about is absolutely needed to be done if you want to sell more books in terms of making money or in terms of reaching out more people who will be reading your book. So that's this is who we are talking for, because otherwise, if you just want to write a book and publish it on Kindle, you can still do that, and it's no problem at all. And in that case, you don't really have to go through all that, right?
Exactly. And by the way, if you just want to impress your friends and family, you can use my data too, because I can tell you all those categories where there's less than 50 titles in the category, where just by selling 2 books you will be a number 1 bestseller. So if you just want to impress your family, you can use the data as well.
Okay, so in order to wrap it up, we already kind of covered a lot. We gave the idea of how this works and what needs to be done. So I guess all we have to do before parting is just to let people know where they should go to get access to all this.
Well, thank you very much. And by the way, thank you for the opportunity of telling people about it. So if you're interested in klytics.com, check us out. The website is k-lytics.com. So it's like Kindle without Indle. A hyphen and lytics, such as in analytics.com, k-lytics.com. There you find all the information. You find various membership tiers, and also what is also possible if you only are interested in 1 or 2 genres, we do offer just single genre reports. So if you are into romance or if you are into science fiction, you don't have to do a whole subscription. You can just get the relevant research report for your genre and get your feet wet. Even if you just want to check us out and follow us, go to k-lytics.com/blog. You will find hopefully lots of interesting information there as well.
So lots of free stuff also there in terms of, just information and just you keeping up with what's going on Amazon and Kindle.
Exactly right.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for coming over. It was really informational. Thanks for sharing all this with the listeners. And, I wish you success with what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you very much for everyone who listened. So look forward to talking to you next time. And hey, have a great and productive writing week or selling week or both.
Yeah, both sounds great. Thanks a lot. Take care.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, I have a feeling that that's all we had for you today. I hope that you found the interview valuable. And if you have time and would like to help me grow the podcast, please make sure you subscribe to it on iTunes and also leave a review. It will take just a couple of minutes. And otherwise, you can always connect with me through my website, anialexander.com. Meanwhile, just keep writing, don't give up, and make sure that in 2016, which is really, really close, you will end up with a new published book. Take care and have a great week.